an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Well, you may be listening to this on the first day of August, but we are sitting in the studio recording on the ultimate day of July 2024. Welcome in. It is Now and Next from Story Studio Network. I'm Dave Trafford. And just a programming note, we're going to take a break through August just to let people put tools down and kind of breathe in some of that forest fire smoke-driven air that's making its way wafting across the country right now. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But much to talk about, and I gave the crew some homework, and they were really quick to answer back, so I'm really interested to hear how this is going to go. Last week, the show, 2 weeks ago, we talked about the Trump situation and the attempted assassination, and last week, I think I raised some hackles of this panel by suggesting that last week's Now and Next was the best show we had produced all year long, so... But it was a month to the day from the Biden Trump debate, and I thought, okay, we had to kind of dig back and roll back the timeline and get analysis on what the hell's going on with the U.S. presidential election. If you missed last week, go and check it out, because we kind of walked through a timeline with the events, and then we sit down with John Wright. He is the master pollster from Maru Public Opinion. And David Schultz is a professor of political science at Hamline University and an authority on the U.S. Constitution. He's a friend of the show, and he's been on since pretty much Donald Trump took the ride on the escalator and declared himself a candidate for president. And it's a pretty interesting reset of the campaign. So I would suggest you go back and do that. So no pressure. We anticipate, though, that this will be the best podcast I produce this week. So here we are with Lindsay Broadhead, Anne-Marie Aikins, Brad Ross, Bob Reid. Good morning, all. And, Brad, you kind of you held your tongue when I suggested last week's was the best show we'd ever done.
And I went and listened to it, Dave, and it was pretty darn good. I'll give you that. It was pretty darn good. So, but I think we can match at least today.
Well, and I think that there's a lot to talk about here, because we want to get back to, the level of government that affects us first and foremost more than any other level of government. And you all had experience to some degree in that area. You've not been far from City Hall in the work you've done as comms experts and advisors to campaigns, et cetera. So I kind of want to walk through year one with Mayor Olivia Chow. We just had the last council meeting this past week. They won't be back into the chair till sometime in September again, or is it October? It's a while. It's out there anyway. So I thought this would be a good time to kind of have this conversation, set us off into the back half of summer, and what we should be looking forward to in the new. I always call it the new year. September still feels like the new year to me, because kids going back to school in the old radio days, that was the big rating period. So I asked everybody here to sort of set up and take stock of where we are with the mayor's tenure after year one. Bob, there's the good, there's the bad, and there's the meh. And there are certain things that are just going to happen in Toronto politics that the mayor can bang the drum all the mayor wants, but the mayor is only one seat on a council. So there is that challenge, and it's not as easy as saying, you can whip the vote like you could at Queen's Park. Start with you. Good? What do you think, based on what she did and what the performance of the council?
I think her greatest achievements so far have been the deals she's been able to broker with the senior levels of government that seemed like they were just so far out of reach before she set to work on that. She's demonstrated very well that she can play nicely with others in the sandbox and can get concessions on things that were critically important. The deal to swap the Gardner and the DVP with Queen's Park, the deal to get greater support from the feds for the pressures on Toronto in dealing with refugees and other immigration services and those kinds of things. Dealing with what seemed to be an insurmountable budget deficit. And the latest analysis I saw was we're actually running a bit of a surplus when this was the biggest crater fiscally that Toronto had ever had to deal with. So she's been very good in achieving a lot of things and a lot of specific things with the senior levels. The bad, I think, is
just hold on to the bad because we'll come back to that.
Okay.
I want to kind of get around.
All
so
right.
Just
there's my good.
Yeah, that's the good. And I think I want to be positive on this because let's face it, she was the unanticipated mayor, Lindsay. We didn't even, a year and a half ago, never would have considered that, we were going to need another mayor in the city of Toronto. John Tory was doing a good job, and away we go. But here she was thrust into the job. Where are you on this?
In terms of the good, just building what Bob was just talking about, she takes an incredible consultative approach. We saw that with the budget, how she went out to the public. There were telephone town halls, there were online petitions. She gives the feeling, and I kind of want to dwell on that word for a second. She gives the feeling to the public like their voice matters, especially at a time when I think a lot of people don't feel like their vote counts in the same way it used to. So not only will we see a lot more of that, it's a strikingly different kind of approach than we've seen before. And it plays out, again, not only in the public, the person on the street, but also, as Bob was saying, up the ladder to the very top echelons where she can play hardball, right? Clearly, she's been at the table. She's found common ground with unlikely friends, maybe, who knew that she and Premier Ford would be arm in arm and they're best buddies, because we've learned the data shows that Trudeau Ford benefit from having Olivia in the photo op. They benefit from having her at the table, and that's something new.
Brad?
Yeah, I think I think we're all probably going to build on the same thing, and that is, certainly around the budget. I'm a bit, I'm grateful that we're no longer hearing the tax hikes at or below the rate of inflation, because nobody actually really knew what that meant. And it just simply put the city behind the eight ball every single time for political reasons that really nobody could explain, other than, no one likes a tax hike. So she got a 9.5% property tax increase this year, something that was unimaginable, as I say, because everybody, preached this, rate of inflation at or below. So good for her on that. And yeah, playing nice with other governments. And it does require city level of government. I think, as you said off the top there, Dave, is that one order of government, as we say at the city. It's an order of government, not a level, because we're all equal. But anyway, that order of government that touches your everyday life more than any other. Turn on the tap, turn on the light, put your garbage out, go for a walk. I mean, these are all city services. So it requires some deal making. And yeah, to Bob's point, uploading the DVP and the Gardner was huge. I mean, she did some deals with Doug, I think, naming Rob Ford, naming the Centennial Park Stadium, the Rob Ford Stadium as an example, I think, is the kinds of deals that she's made and will continue to make, I'm sure.
I want to come back to all of this, but just before we get to that, Anne-Marie, when we talk about, the good that the mayor has managed to finesse in the last 12 months, it does come down to communication, but it also has to be against the backdrop of her campaign, where she talked about making the, housing had to be a priority and that things had to be more affordable in the city. Where do you sit?
I think if you remember back to the campaign, she didn't articulate very much. There was all kinds of talk around her about the massive tax increase, but she never did deal with that directly. So it wasn't a big surprise when she came out with such a large increase. That really, a few years ago, was unheard of. It just was unheard of that could be marshaled through without just a lot more, negative reaction. And she managed to get that through. And people kind of have just went on with life. Yep, it went up 9.5%. That's the way it was. So that's to her credit. And I agree with all of the other points my panelists have made. But the one I think she has set some of her priorities, I think, very correctly, the urgency in housing. So she has really made that her mission to get more housing built, and she's been trying to do that. We can talk later about maybe how she could do that better, but I think she's done, to her credit, that. She's also, it wasn't easy taking over it was a shock to the city when we re-elected John Tory, but then when he had to suddenly step down soon after he was elected. A city can undergo a lot of upset and change, and we don't handle change very well. And she has made it the transition pretty seamless, and that's again to her credit. That takes a lot of work to keep things steady.
Let me go back to the budget then, and this is for all of you just to kind of kick around, because I think to Anne-Marie's point, the idea that, oh my God, it was a 9.5% increase in municipal taxes, pretty much fizzled out. The conversation died within 12 hours of it passing nearly unanimously, and away we go. And so that was good. The other side of that coin, and we're hearing it today because, as we speak, there's a protest going on to talk about the increase in the funding for police in this city. And this was something of what would qualify in Toronto as a political standoff between the mayor and the chief, really, when, we need this, otherwise we're going to be hell in a handbasket, was pretty much the message from College Street, that police headquarters. And the mayor caved on that, Bob, and I use that. I don't think that's hyperbole. I think she could have stood her ground and said, seriously, you think to tell me that this amount of money, and it was millions of dollars in $1 billion, budget, is going to make the difference between hell in a handbasket or, a safe city? To me, there was way more space in between those two arguments.
Yeah, and she could have easily not given them exactly what they were after and still delivered a sizable increase, because what was on the table at first was an increase to the police budget. It just wasn't as big as the police said they needed, which she ultimately ended up going with. Yeah, I wonder what the political calculus was inside, if there was that much done that, okay, we need to throw a bone here in the first budget. So, and I'm thinking a lot about the next budget, because you're entirely right. This one was done, big tax increase that drifted off the radar really quickly. It's not a water cooler thing that people are talking about day by day. So we've moved on from that. So what does the next budget look like? What does the next property tax increase look like? How far will she go on that? Because she's not going to flatline. She's not going to keep it to inflation. It will be another substantive increase, but how much will it be and how will that get sold? And then linked with it is, what about the police piece? Did she throw the bone in the first budget, and now is she going to clamp down on that going forward? I expect in both cases we won't see as big a property tax increase, but it'll be pretty close. On the police budget side, I don't think we'll see as substantive an increase as we did this time around.
Lindsay, then what's the backdrop of this next conversation? Because we knew now, we had to reset everything in the city of Toronto, make it more affordable, make it safer, make housing a priority, all of these things. To Bob's point now, we've to some degree put the train back on the track. What's the next background conversation to put context around a budget in this city?
They need to make substantial moves so that people feel the change. As you all were saying, the 9.5% landed in a really rational way. It could have been such a thunderous blah to the public. It could have been a disaster, but it landed in a really rational spot, almost uniformly. The question is now, how do we convert that into real measures? My concern, and I guess I'm dipping my toe into the bad, and I won't take away from that, but the priorities, I kind of dispute the idea that their team has set priorities well. I think housing's too big, right? Some of these things are just too big. You're never going to solve housing. Certainly not within a short time span. There are so many.
And not at the municipal level.
And not at the municipal level. And mind you, other levels, other orders of government, Brad, are stepping in. But to set it at such a high bar, I worry that we're setting ourselves up for failure. So I think in terms of the next wave, her team has to be very clear on what success actually looks like. And it needs to be more incremental, and it needs to ladder directly to benefit. So if we're talking about congestion, if we're talking about housing, what are the specific things that are being done? Saying that there's 65,000 units being built means nothing. It's too big. If we measure things in swimming pools often, it's too many swimming pools to actually conceive. So what is the actual conversion that success means, so that our streets look better, so that we feel safer, so that, we can drive from A to B without saying 28 expletives. Those will be the true measures of success.
So, Brad, when we look at it from that perspective, then we're talking about outcomes. I mean, and to actually say budgets are tied to outcome, whether it's police or housing or transit or anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think it's expectation management is what needs to now happen. So on the police budget, I think the cops were looking for an extra $12 million, and I think Mayor Chow, in the end, you used the word caved, but I think she had no choice to get the 9.5% she needed from certain members of council, because there's always that dealing that has to go on. So now what happens? So now she's got all that. She, as you say, that the 12.5 sort of fizzles after 12.5 hours. But then you look at, like Lindsay was saying, it was going to start dipping our toe into the bad here a little bit, but congestion, the island ferries, for example, the state of parks, encampments, all of these big issues that are right there in front of everybody's face as they're moving around the city. The state of good repair and the TTC, all of these things, there has to be some change now. We need to see something tangible for. In budget, there's no budget season in Toronto. It's like construction season. It's 12 months of the year now, and that's budget season in Toronto. It's 12 months of they're planning right now. I guarantee it. So, what is that going to look like? Come later this fall. So I think the comms is going to be the big piece.
Yeah, and Anne-Marie, I think that based on that, when we look at what's in front of the mayor, and everybody's described this, and I'm going to say this with a small lowercase s, we are expecting a strong mayor in the city, because at some point there needs to be this. I get the consultation part of it, and that's an important part of it, but somebody has to have a vision and say, this is where we're going, and this is what it's going to look like, and that's how we're getting there, and that's when we're going to get there, period.
Oh, exactly. And I think, again, dipping our toe into the negative is we really need the mayor to be a visionary leader now more than ever, because it really does feel like this. Most people, regardless of your economic status in Toronto, you're feeling like the city's just falling apart. So there is that notion that I can't drive anywhere because the congestion's so bad. I can't. So it really feels like an urgent time. And so that's when you really need a visionary leader that says, this is where we're going, and this is how I'm going to get you there. And as your leader, I'm going to make bold decisions that to get us there. So I've always felt that she's kind of lacking that. she does, as Lindsay said, she likes to do a lot of consultation with the public, which is great. But sometimes you get lost in all the let's just keep talking about it until everyone's happy. And that's never going to get you anywhere, because no one is ever going to be happy. So if we're going to, and it sounds like we are going to need a large increase next year, she's not going to have such an easy walk the next time. We have to face, a 9.8 point whatever increase in our budget. It just, people are going to say, well, where did the previous 9.5% go? Show me the goods. Show me the evidence. Show me the benefit, because the city feels like it's continuing to deteriorate. So what are you doing with our money? So she's going to have a harder time. She's also going to start seeing, she's going to disappoint the left, because she is very much she's been identified by the left as, the person that's going to implement all of the things that where they want the city to go. And she's going to start really disappointing them, just like Bob Rae. He ended up disappointing the left entirely, and they turned against him. So that she's going to have to manage that and prepare for it. And right now, I don't see her. She does a lot of reacting and not proactively communicating things and showing her vision for that. We can talk about that more, but that's where she really needs to go.
Yeah, Bob, it's almost as if the mayor should have been out in front of this back in January, before we started talking about what happened after the first year, to really give us a sense. Yep, we know that this was past 9 points. Now we're all, to Brad's point, we're into the next budgeting plan already, and here's what we should be expecting. Boom. That should have happened 6 months ago, no?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, managing expectations, as we all know, is key, especially in political communications. And we're not seeing a lot of that. There's not a clear sense of, okay, so now what happens? Where do we go from here? And I was nodding my head along with Anne-Marie, because the big challenge she's going to be having is that notion of demonstrating benefit and combating that feeling, doing something. Give us one thing where collectively we can go, yeah, that's gotten better since Olivia Chow became mayor. And I haven't seen that yet, and I don't expect to see it, because the big problems that the city is facing, I think, are beyond her control. Even as good as she is getting help and dollars from Queen's Park and Ottawa, it's the number one thing is the gridlock and the congestion, and how people are altering not only their personal plans, but the way they do business in this city. Because they're saying, I just can't get from point A to point B in time to have that meeting, or to attend that function, or to do that event. And so that I think is going to be her undoing, especially as the Gardner repair drags on. Oh, it's not going to be 3 years, but it's still going to be 2. And that's not going to get any better. So this is the big mountain that she has, is to deliver something tangible where people can feel that something has changed, and not that we're still in, as Anne-Marie said, this state of chaos and feeling that nothing's working anymore.
I had to laugh, Brad. I was reading, you guys probably saw Ed Keenan's piece in the Star last week when they announced this, acceleration of the repairs and maintenance on the Gardner, and the line that really got me is, you probably have a loved one right now who's stuck in traffic in the Gardner. The good news is they'll be home before the World Cup.
Right.
I mean, it kind of plays right into that. We talk about managing expectation. Our expectation is that government will not deliver on that. And I didn't hear, everybody was so hopeful that, oh my God, we're going to have this done a year sooner. Really? We're really confident that that's going to happen. Is that right?
Let me just say, I think, on the bat, if I may, I think her communications has been sorely lacking. And it's not that she herself is not a good communicator. I just don't think she's all that well briefed, at least not yet. I think we look at that flooding issue, and she was out doing a scrum, when cars were were literally in water on the Don Valley Parkway, and really didn't have a whole lot of answers. And it required the next day she went out with the city manager to sort of explain things. So, once upon a time when the world was flat and I was at City Hall, there's no way that, and this is a credit to the mayor's office, frankly, Tory's office, that, he's going to be out. They want briefings on they need a briefing note. They need messaging. They need all of that. He needs to understand what is going on at a high level. And we're not expecting the mayor of Toronto, whoever it may be, to be an engineer and to explain, the technical issues that are happening. But they need to be able to speak at a high level. They need to have answers as to, what happened. Why wasn't the highway closed sooner? Those kinds of questions you have to anticipate. It's fairly fundamental, and you have to have an answer for them. So on that, I think there's definitely room for improvement on the comms front as a comms person.
Yeah, well, so was that a fail then, Lindsay? Just even how the whole thing was managed. I mean, here, and I'll give you an anecdote. We had tickets for Mirvish that night, okay? And I'm sitting down here in my windowless room, and I come up, and holy cow, it's like the apocalypse outside, and it's raining like hell, and away we go. I get a text message from my wife. She's coming up from downtown, and she gets on the Parkway before it's closed. But I'm trying to pay attention to what's going on with the Parkway, with various things. How should I get downtown? I found that the comms, not just out of City Hall, but the TTC was really weak. And whatever I was getting from media sounded confused. Now, I was in the newsroom in 2013 when it happened, and so on. And I understand why it sounds confused, because all hell's breaking loose and you've got shit happening all over the city. But in this case, I didn't know whether or not it made. First of all, I sent an X message to Mirvish. Is the show on or not? Because all I could see was Whitecaps on the Lakeshore Boulevard, and downtown Union Station was underwater. Mirvish didn't get back to me. Okay, well, if I'm going to go, I better go. So I'm listening to the subway reports. Either they're closed or they're not closed, and they were open or they weren't open. And Parkway closed at Bayview Bloor. So I fire up the app, and that seemed to be the best way to actually get downtown, oddly enough. And the way that was just managed, the closure 4 hours after it was closed was Abbott and Costello bullshit. It was hilarious because the police or the city just put 2 trucks across the road rather than tapering the closure up to, say, Millwood on the Parkway, and we could all kind of, taper our way in. You had 3 lanes plus the exit lane all jammed at the bottom of that closure, and we were late for the show. Now, call me an idiot for doing whatever, but, paid $200 for the tickets. I didn't want to cough them up just because of bad weather. And the city was telling me you could do this. I could take that route. So there was a lot of communication in the moment that was a problem for me. And I really didn't understand, and I like to think I'm paying attention. I didn't understand how badly it could have been managed, considering it seemed like not so long ago, and Anne-Marie, you will remember that night really well with the train with the snakes and the Don River. We had this experience already. Where was the response?
Dave, we need this episode to be about 80 hours long to unpack some of this. What you're talking about is a whole bunch of things. And I, having recently just come from the city, I have to keep it classy, right? I have to somewhat keep it classy.
We'd expect nothing else.
Well, there you are. So, but what I'll say is this, and I'll look at it from a communications from a corporate or an organizational perspective. When you're going through time of high issue management or crisis, you focus in on the priorities, right? And the priorities need to be clearly articulated, and everyone on that team, soup to nuts, need to be rowing in the same direction on those priorities. When it comes to the flood, right, that's a moment in any organization where you need to demonstrate excellent internal communications, right? So everyone knows what's going on internally. And I'm preaching to the choir, right? I'm assuming we have communications listeners, and certainly my colleagues here know as much or more than I do. But you need excellent internal communications so that you have a plan and you're articulating a single coherent plan. That plan in terms of operations should have been baked ages ago, right? The notion that the congestion is too bad and therefore we're going to leave the Gardiner open is such high risk behavior. Now, I don't know the degree to which that was true or not, or, it was.
You mean the
true.
Parkway, leaving the Parkway open?
The Don Valley Parkway, sorry. Though the water may have leveled up to the Gardiner at some point, but yes, it did. That type of action we've seen before. Operations should be A to B. And what that indicates is that people are swaying behind the scenes, not sure what to do because they're dealing with too many crises or too many issues that they have balls in the air. And this all came out live on camera, right? So I don't know the degree to which this will change future action, but I hope it certainly does. The one unclassy thing I will say for a moment is we've seen this play out with the rain tax, which is going to rear its ugly head again, right? Indecision. We saw this happening, and this is interesting for me to say, but with the vacant home tax, indecision. And what needs to happen is a tighter internal team. For any issues management, if you get your home in order, the rest of the world won't see the bumps along the way.
I completely agree with all of what Lindsay just said, and Brad and Bob. That there has been during a crisis, you need strong leaders. You need a strong leader out front that's out front there all the time, giving the messages as the information changes, because that's what happens during a crisis. It's constantly evolving. And that was sorely lacking in this. It could be she's in the middle of changing very slowly all of her senior leadership teams. Many of them are leaving or have gone already. And that does it rocks the boat for sure. So I can see a lack of strong communication leaders within. That's not just you, Lindsay, that have left the city. Brad's left the city, so they really got some. There is you can see the vacancy there, and that they're going to have to bring on very strong leaders, more training in crisis communications for sure, that kind of thing. But the lessons that we learned from the 2013 flood, and we did this as a debrief after that flood, all the lessons that we learned throughout it. They broke all of those the rules that we learned. They didn't follow any of them. And one of the things I did hear, and this really, really concerns me, and it's about lack of leadership because of the hits. Mayor Chow has taken over the congestion issue. Her office was very reluctant to close the DVP because of the hits they've been taking as a result of the congestion criticism. So that's what kind of I'm hearing, internal scuttlebutt. And that is just clearly so wrong on so many levels that she put the city, if that's true, she put the city at risk by not closing the DVP. That is a really, I know no one, doesn't appear anybody was hurt or died, but the potential flooding can take lives. And the fact that the DVP remained open really did put people at risk, and we saw the end result of it, and the damage that caused to the highway, to people's personal equipment, people's vehicles, everything, is going to total millions, if not billions. It's incredible the damage that it causes, and we know that from 2013.
Could I just say, Dave, I think from staff's perspective, and Lindsay was in the same position I was, I know for a fucking fact that the communication staff at the City of Toronto were all over this, like white on rice. And so how those messages and how the response trickled up or down to the mayor's office, I don't know. I'm not privy to that. This notion that the mayor's office was opposed to and refused to close the DVP. I find that would be an appalling decision. The Emergency Operations Center, these are the kinds of things in coordination with Toronto Police Service would just close the damn thing, right? I mean, they do it during winter storms. You don't ask for permission. You ask for forgiveness if necessary, but in the name of good public policy around public safety, you do what needs to be done in these situations. So I'm with you, Anne Marie. I mean, it's a leadership issue potentially, and that's where come back to the comms piece. But I know that the team that I worked with at the City of Toronto would have been all over this in every which way.
As would have mine, I have to say. As would have mine.
It might be splitting a hair fairly finely here, but I think it's important to say that there's a communications staff who speaks for the city and doesn't
Correct.
necessarily speak for the mayor's office. I mean, just so everybody
Correct. Yes.
is clear on that,
Yes.
right? So, Bob, one of the other things, and this kind of lends itself a little bit to the people around the mayor. I'm hearing criticisms that, we used to laugh, John Tory would, arrive at the opening of an envelope. I mean, he would go to everything. And God love him for doing it. I mean, John was out, I don't know how he got off on his 3.5 hours of sleep a night or whatever it was. But that's what a criticism I'm hearing for Mayor Chow, that she's spending more time at parks and community events and that kind of thing and not getting down in the weeds or paying attention. Doesn't matter how many briefings are written, she's not sharp on that because she's spending so much time consulting or handshaking.
Well, we've seen it with the bumps that she's had in the road so far, and this panel has already identified numerous occasions where that leadership and that presence was not present, and so I'm hoping that some lessons will be learned from that going forward. I'm also cutting a little bit of slack in that for any administration in its first year, there's a learning curve. There are staffing changes. There are rumblings that there will be some significant staffing changes at City Hall and in the mayor's office. So hopefully that will shake itself out. But yeah, you got to show up. You got to be there in the good times or the bad to show that you're there, that you're on the job, and that you're not getting sidelined into these kinds of things that have been identified.
So let's just go quick around the table, and in keeping with the season, gold, silver, bronze, or miss the podium. Lindsay, what do you think?
Oh dear God. Well, she's here. How's this for a deferral? She's a decathlete, right? She's in many different events. She's getting gold in a couple. She's getting maybe bronze in a couple, and she's absolutely tripped the hurdle on a couple as well. So, I don't know if she'll be on the podium or not at the end of the competition, but she's running, she's throwing, she's jumping. We'll see.
So if she's tripping over that, she's the Pretty to Feliciane. Is that what you're telling me here? With all the potential.
I'm working my metaphor as hard as I possibly can.
There we go.
Dave,
okay, well,
and it was an impressive display.
We'll call it miss the podium.
Yeah.
All right, Bob, what do you think?
I'm going to give her a silver, and per Lindsay, she's hit gold in some areas. She has not shown in others, but I think on balance she's won more than she's lost. So I'll call it a silver.
There we go. Anne Marie.
Well, this is a tough one because there's some things that she's just bombed, like the Uber decision to surprise council with a decision to cap licenses on Uber. Nobody knew about that was coming, and that's like nobody heard about it, and boom, it was there, and it backfired on her, and she had to retreat on it. So that was early on, and it made her look like a very, very weak leader, and so it was a clear fail on that regard. She wouldn't get anywhere near the podium. Another one I was more hopeful from her was that she would really make a significant change on the bureaucracy around planning decisions and housing and so forth. and she just keeps kind of picking at it and not really making, really significant change. I really have disliked the fact that she keeps deflecting. Like,
it's not her problem. It's not a problem. She inherited the mess,
previous
right?
administration,
Yeah.
or worse than that, she has blamed staff. This was a staffing problem. That really irks me as a leader. If you ever blame your staff, publicly by throwing them under the bus, it really irked me. So those kinds of things have really made me give her. And she's not on the podium for me this term, but I'm hopeful. And I'm hoping this term is she gets the most improved medal.
All right, 2 missed the podiums, 1 silver. Brad, where are you?
I was leaning silver, but just this conversation, I'm sort of edging towards bronze. And you stole my thunder a little bit, Anne-Marie. I was on the throwing staff under the bus as well. The vacant home tax comes to mind, and not owning issues. And I mean, that is issues management 101. Whether it's yours to own or not, you're the leader. You own the damn thing. And so that bothers me. And the congestion issue as well. She has let Councillor Brad Bradford run with this thing, unintentionally, I suppose, but he's got op-eds here, there, and everywhere, especially around the Gardner issue. And my days at the TTC and at the city, if you don't invest in infrastructure, and that means there's going to be some short-term pain, and perhaps maybe it's long-term pain. I don't know, however you want to frame it. If you're not investing in that, though, you're going to be answering a whole lot of different, more difficult questions in a couple of years when that infrastructure fails, whether it collapses, whether it does this, that, or the other, and somebody is quite literally killed. So I think that's an opportunity missed on that front, and letting others sort of define you is a problem for me. So solid bronze from me.
There we go.
Nice sound effects.
Nope. Nobody went to the gold medal podium. So we'll give that one to our comms crew today.
Dave,
for all the
what
insight.
was the bronze noise there? That was fabulous.
That's
Just I love that.
little party
Very
horn.
cute.
All right, before we go, I get this question all the time, and so knowing that you guys are in the comms business, what do you hear? What do you hear is just things that we should be paying attention to, and we'll start with you, Anne-Marie, whether it's around City Hall or elsewhere.
Oh, I think you're going to see more change. I think she is going to embrace the notion of spending her political capital much earlier. I read this today, so I'm going to instead of on her political capital on creating change, because you got to do that early. And so, like why the tax hike went over, that was done early in her tenure, and she moved on from that. But I really think that there's going to be more change, and that's going to mean, I think, whether it's her team change, building on her team. I think there's some leadership there lacking, and I think she's going to realize that and bring it in. And also, clearly, the number of people that have left City Hall in leadership capacity have got to be replaced. So we're going to see lots of change there. Even we're going to see change at the TTC level. So that's normal for a new leader. They usually their lieutenants up there are changed at some point. So I think we're going to see lots of change, new people, new faces. So pay attention for that.
Lindsay?
You mentioned earlier that September is actually the start of the year, and I think you're spot on. And it coincides with what will also be a soft start to the next election. I think, if we can believe it, we're already going to be thinking of that. One audience that hasn't been given their due, especially in comparison to John Tory, whether you support this or not, John Tory leaned in heavily to the business community. This administration is leaning more to public issues, right? And we see this dynamic play out. I believe corporate communications from various organizations with single issue interests are going to lean in heavily to putting money behind big corporate campaigns to try to mobilize views and opinions and influence political outcomes. And that should start around the silly season of September.
Yeah, we're already seeing, for example, the Board of Trade's out in front on that stuff, right?
Well, and yeah, absolutely.
Already doing that. Brad, what do you think?
I think Emery touched on it. I think we're going to see some change. Obviously, we're going to see change at the TTC with respect to the CEO. I would not be surprised, though, if we also didn't see a change in the chair. And I think there's an opportunity coming up where, committees, you see a bit of a, kind of like a cabinet shuffle where committees, committee chairs might get shuffled out, or committee memberships. Usually happens halfway through the term. I think I'm not convinced that Jamal Myers has been the most effective TTC chair, so I would not be surprised if we saw some change there.
Bob, what do you think?
I'm hearing that Doug Ford's staff at Queen's Park are exhausted. They are very glad that we are coming into the month of August, and aside from Ford Fest coming up shortly, I think we can anticipate things to be pretty quiet for at least the next month around the Premier and his folks while they recharge batteries. And I'm not surprised to be hearing that. It's been a slog for them, and so enjoy the weather.
Well, and we should just qualify that. It'll be quiet on the Ford scale.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
It's just quiet.
Good point.
around the Premier is a little extraordinary.
Yeah.
Just on that then, and the only other thing I'll say, and this is kind of from some of the guys I've been talking to who've been watching, will we go in the spring or we won't go in the spring with a provincial election? And I've heard some folks say, watch the crosstown. If the crosstown ribbon is cut by the end of the calendar year, it's highly likely we're going into an election in the spring.
Is that the Gregorian calendar, Dave? Sorry, is that the Gregorian calendar we're talking about?
Geological calendar? Yeah. So, and the only reason is because there's no way he would go into a spring election with that still hanging over his head. So take that as you will. I'm guessing you're putting your money on a late election, Brad.
Late election. I am, yes.
It's a good point, though, you raise, absolutely.
Well, and get her done. We got the beverages all lined up, so that was good. So here's to all you. Let's
Dave, may I say one thing?
Yeah, sure. I'm torn here. Go ahead.
As much as I love John Wright, I think we just slayed this episode.
Here.
Oh, there we go.
Yes.
All right, there's the challenges out. Exactly. Well, but and here's what I will say is that what we heard in the last 45 minutes from the four of you, I didn't hear anywhere else when it came to assessing where the city is, assessing the performance of the mayor, coming to terms with what the council has to do and should do, and what to expect next. So I'm just thrilled that I get to surround myself with good people, and you guys were able to do that. So, you, John Wright, David Schultz, it's hard to choose now. It's pretty good. Listen, y'all, take a page out of the Ford team's book and enjoy your month off, and I'll be back in your inbox bugging you come September. So thanks for doing this. It's always fun.
Have a great summer.
Enjoy, everybody.
Bye, gang.
Thanks, Dave.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Now and next is Story Studio Network's flagship podcast, produced by our chief executive producer, Dave Trafford, and supported by our entire SSN team, including our senior producers, Becky Coles and Jen Hudson, our technical producer and audio editor, Mike Trutler. Jamie Nickerson is our production manager, and our sonic logo designer is Greg McDonald. Also, I'm Aaron Trafford, Queen of the Universe.
And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, everybody, that's a wrap.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.